the 21st century. And the guest is Dr. LMadu, who has given us some information about, some background information rather, about traditional African religions. And Dr. LMadu, let's pick up where we left off the last time dealing with this religious experience of early Africans.
You know what, what confused, the Europeans and other foreigners when they came to Africa is that they thought that Africans, worship so many gods. And of course, when you talk of, religion in Africa, you talk of religions and gods, so that confused those, who are unaware of the African way of worship. Now, there are so many gods with different names. The Yorubas have different names and different gods. The Igbos have different names and different gods. The Ashantis have different names and different gods. The Baganda has different names, different gods. The Kikuyu, the Luo, the Bakongo, all of them have different gods with different names. Even from village to village has different gods and different names, you see. But what unifies them is the belief in one supreme being. Okay, one supreme being, God, like Muslims say Allah.
Allah.
Yes, one supreme being. Now, what are these gods for? These gods are intermediaries, emissaries, to the bigger God. Because the traditional African religionist does not believe that God is close by. God is unreachable. God is far off. And for you to talk to God, you got to go through an intermediary, a deity, who speak to that bigger God instead of you going directly. Exactly, you go through this small God. Absolutely. So the foreigners got confused. Say, well, they have so many gods. No, they do not worship those things you see. It's simply a medium to speak to the big God. Because Africans think, that big God is too much for somebody to, contact directly. So they go through those small gods to contact the big God. And that's essentially very important to understand. Now they saw Africans killing, animals and also, oh, it's the enemies. Okay. But you forget that even in the Bible, Abraham and others wanted to, kill some for God. Okay? Yeah. So it's not animal worship either. That's how they came with enemies. No. Those are offerings to appease the small gods who give the message to the big gods. Exactly, to the big God over there. So the unifying theme of African traditional religion is the belief in the supreme being. Okay, the supreme being. Now, the mediums or the intermediaries, who speak to God through, from deliver the message.
Who might be the learned men and the prophets, and etc.
Exactly.
And indeed might be Christ himself, who you have to pray through in order to reach God.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's correct. Just the way you have crucifixes in the churches. You're not worshiping those crucifixes. You're just looking at it and say, well, speaking to God. So that's what those, different gods and deities symbolizes. Though, it has one unifying theme of believing in supreme God. The way of worship is different from localities to principalities to regions. The Igbos worship differently. Every other group worship differently. They have different names, like I've said before. But it's the same religion. It's like different religions, one system. Okay, different way of worshiping.
Catholicism or Protestantism or whatever.
That's correct.
Yeah, good.
One system. It's just like you have Methodists, Baptists and all this, but it's still one system. Okay, so the different worships in different localities is still one system of worship with different nuances in different places, you see. So when people see all these differences too, they don't understand. It's just the same. You compare it with, the different religions, and you see the same thing.
Very good. All worshiping one God.
Exactly.
Yeah, one supreme being.
One supreme being. And, you rarely see an African who doesn't believe in anything, who doesn't believe in God. Okay, most Africans are very religious. And that was why during the colonial war, a lot of the African leaders like Nelson Mandela and Agostinho Neto, Mugabe, they were called communists. But most Westerners did not understand that all these guys went to Christian, even Catholic religious schools. They do not believe in communism per se, because Africa already is a communalist society. They didn't need to impose the way the Russians or the Chinese live in Africa. Africa is already a communalist state, to put it that way, because in the villages, people live a communal life. They share everything, land, food, you name it. So they're already that system in Africa. So most of these folks didn't need to,
be communist, socialist, or whatever.
Exactly, become anti-Christ and atheists. None of them do. And as events have shown that Mandela and the rest are not what they were portrayed to be, because people did not understand the effect of religion, in the lives of Africans. Having said that, people have talked about the intolerance, of Africans to people's different religious beliefs. That's not so. That's far from the truth. And in fact, Africa is the most ecumenical continent in the world. Okay? Now, one can say that Africa, tolerates other religions more than any other continent. You can say that Islam is an Afro-Asian religion, because it's only in Africa and Asia that you have Muslim states and Christian states. You see, in fact, in Asia, the only Christian state really you might talk about is Philippines. An overwhelmingly Catholic, country. The rest of Asia is Muslim and Hindu. Now, you can also say that Africa, Christianity is also an Afro-Western religion, because most Christian states are in Africa or in Europe. With the exception of Albania or Kosovo and few Muslims in Russia, most of Europe is Christian. So Africa, encompasses both religions. You see, and
Islam and Christianity.
Islam and Christianity, and that shows you a higher tolerance of other people's religions. Because these two religions came to Africa. It didn't grow up in Africa. But Africans were able to accept it and at the same time incorporate some elements of these religions into traditional African religion.
Very good. Of course, Dr. LMadu, let's take this second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.